Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here with my review for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. As the title says, there will be spoilers in the second half, but of course, I'll let you guys know when we get to that. Simply getting into it, this is my least favorite of the three films. I don't hate it though. I think it was definitely a good film, but because the Guardians movies are definitely seen as more of, the comedy movies within, the MCU, it's kind of like Guardians and then Ant-Man is like, those are the franchises where it's like, those are comedy movies that are superhero movies with some action in them. This one was definitely the most serious. I still think it was funny, but I don't think it was as comedic because of the story, the main story that they were telling, it being so serious and stuff like that. And just the way they did the emotions of the characters with this kind of seemingly being, I would assume like the last, Guardians movie, excuse me. It was definitely like the most serious. And I think that's why I like it the least. Cause I was just like, okay, definitely funny, definitely enjoyed it. And there's some other random things, some stuff being pseudo comic book based where I'm like, I don't know everything about comics, but I know that's, not as cool as it could be. So there's some elements, kind of here and there where I was like, oh, not as entertaining, but all in all, I think it was just the fact that the movie's more serious, it's kind of like the end, or I guess I would say like second half of Guardians 2, where, they have to deal with the emotional element of like, holy crap, Peter's dad is actually the bad guy. Like, and there's some serious stuff that comes with that. And I feel like that was most of this movie. And I don't think that really played too well into it. From my personal perspective, I was just like, I just didn't find it as funny. And despite how much I enjoyed the serious stuff in it, because it'll definitely, there's some stuff in there, like, people have already said it, you'll either tear up or it might make you cry. For me, it was definitely like, if some of the scenes went a little longer, I probably would have done it. But also, I think it was one of those things where it was kind of like some of the sad stuff was just obvious. So I think for a part of me, it was like, it was sad to see it, but it was also kind of like, you can see the movie, and then when the movie starts and they first show something that's like, okay, here's the thing, you're instantly just kind of like, okay, all right, I know what everything said from the trailers and how everyone's been talking about it. I think I know what's going to happen here. I can randomly guess, I'm pretty sure. So I think that's just, it just takes that away from it. At least for me, it did a little bit, because it's just pseudo obvious. But at the same time, it was also just kind of like, I felt like if the scenes actually lasted a little longer and they sat with it even more, it probably would have hit me. But also, I feel like I'm sure they're more than long enough for some other people. Like, everybody's different, obviously. It's just for me, I was kind of like, I expected things to be sad to a certain level, and I was curious kind of going the whole way through how certain things might end up playing out with this, seemingly being like the end of the Guardians of the Galaxy. The whole thing was kind of like, is somebody gonna die in this movie? And it was really kind of up in there. It's like, you don't know what's gonna happen. And I did enjoy that part, because it was definitely some stuff from the very beginning. It was just like, I don't know. Like, there's a lot of stuff that keeps happening, and some of the things, you can kind of get glimpses of in the trailers. It's kind of like that in the movie, where you're just like, this person's hurt or that person's hurt, and this seems like the last film, and I'm like, everybody's like, this is the last Guardians for me, and this and that, and I'm like, I don't know what that means. And as you go through the movie, you're not entirely certain. So there's definitely some questions there for sure, but the more obvious sad stuff, I just feel it's obvious. So still enjoyed it, but I definitely would say it's probably my least favorite of the three, which is unfortunate, but that doesn't make it bad. Like, that's the thing, it's just my least favorite out of the three. Like, I would rather watch 1 and 2 again, just because I find the comedy in them to be much more, and that's actually what I like the most out of the Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, it was more comedy with action in it, and this was definitely less comedy and more drama with action in it, and a bit of comedy as well. I will say, this is the first MCU movie ever to have an F-bomb in it, so congratulations to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. James Gunn was like, I'm leaving, and I'm gonna drop an F-bomb. I guess he just was like, I'm gonna, boom, Guinness World Records. So I don't know why, but they put it in there, and it was definitely one where it was like, oh, that didn't need to be there, but I appreciate it, because it was just funny. So I was like, all right, it is the first MCU film to ever do that. We'll see if they, have another one do it again where it actually fits. But I was like, all right, that has happened now officially. But I love the visuals for it, for sure. I think the visuals are good. I think they have some good action sequences. The very first action sequence, I'll talk about more in spoilers why I liked it, but it also leads into one of the things that I don't actually like as much about the movie. So it's a really cool sequence, but then it leads right into like one of my issues, which is a lot of people who are just like, oh, okay. It's like, especially comic book people. I'm curious for people who never read the comics, who don't care anything about certain characters, how they felt about it. But for me, it was like, oh, this is really cool. And then the rest of the movie played out, and I was like, oh, that was kind of just like a one-off thing then. It's not as cool as I thought it was going to end up being for the movie. But all in all, I still enjoyed it. I definitely say it's worth checking out because it's not a bad movie at all. Some people, I'm sure, I mean, everyone's talking about like it's the best thing, it's the best MCU movie, you know, what in like a super long time. I'm gonna just like, okay, yeah, I would say this is better than Quantumanium. I didn't hate that movie like everyone else did. I also didn't hate Eternals like everyone else did though. So take that as you will. I actually enjoyed Eternals, but I would definitely say that this is better than that. I would say you definitely find more fun in it. I think the story is definitely better written compared to Quantumania, where it was like, I enjoyed that movie, but also there's definitely some issues with that. Just watching is just kind of like, okay, you know, like that's, you know, some just cliche things that are annoying. And this one's like, maybe there's some cliche stuff, you know, like I said, some of the more sad things are more cliche and just obvious, but it's not bad. It doesn't like take you out of it. And there's still a lot of moments where it's just like, I wasn't expecting this thing to happen, or like there's just twists and turns with the way that they deal with their main vision, who's the High Evolutionary, and just who he is as a character and the things that he's done literally like throughout the universe. It's like, oh, this is actually really interesting. So I like what they did with his character. You know, some people aren't so happy. He does scream a lot. I felt like personally that doesn't come until like towards the second half of the film when he, you know, things are like really ramping up. I felt like he was still a decent villain who was calm and stuff like that. I felt like it wasn't really until like the end, except for like there's like one scene in the middle where he screams, but I felt like that was just a very I felt like that was very story driven, and so I thought it made a lot of sense why he was kind of acting erratic in that specific sequence. It made a lot of sense to me. But towards the end, yeah, he screams. He does the villain screaming thing, but I didn't mind it because I was like, it's just as the story progresses, I was like, it kind of makes sense where you see the progression of this character as he goes throughout the film. And of course, I'll talk about that more in spoilers, but all in all, I'd recommend it. Like I said, it is my least favorite of the three, but it's not a bad movie. That's just the thing. I would probably go 1, 2, 3 in that order, because I enjoyed 2 for sure. I felt like 1 just has the best pacing and it being funny as well the whole way through. So I think that's why I enjoy the movies kind of in that order. I think it's hard to say because there's so much happening in the third movie. I don't know if I feel that the pacing is actually bad in any way. Like, I feel like the pacing for the third movie might actually be better than the second movie, because honestly, the second movie, the thing that got me was when they meet his dad and they have like really the happier moments where he's like, oh, he's playing catch and stuff. That chunk of the movie, I always feel the pacing is like just a little too slow, and that's what always took me out of that second movie. Even when I saw it in theaters, I was like, this feels like a slow portion of the movie, and I never felt that with the first one, where it felt like they moved just fast enough to the next sequence. And this one, I think it's like in between those two, where it's like the first one, perfect pacing. The second one, it just really was only that middle chunk, but I felt it. And like every time I watch it, I feel it where I'm like, I guess I'm just not as invested in this sequence. And then 3, I think is like kind of in between, where like the pacing is almost perfect and it doesn't slow down, but maybe there's just a little too much. Maybe that's what it is. Like there's so much stuff that happens in this movie. There isn't a moment where it can be slow, but I guess I prefer, you know, that to being like, oh, I noticed that I don't like this moment as much. So maybe too much stuff for me at least is better than not enough. But I'm like, I feel like it's definitely in between the two. It's not perfect pacing, but it doesn't have a slow moment. Maybe it has a bit too much. So, you know, obviously, once again, everybody's different. They might have a different perspective on that, where you might just be like, wow, it's annoying, where it feels like it's kind of nonstop. But once again, I feel like it flows very well. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but I still feel like it flows pretty well, despite the fact that there's so much stuff that they do, which once again, it's the last movie. And I feel like that's why, you know, some stuff just happens the way that it does, where like, it's got to be in here or it'll never be seen ever again. So that's how I feel about it. I would say it's still definitely worth checking out, you know, in theaters. I still think it was definitely good enough. Definitely an emotional film. You probably will cry. I won't give any spoilers. You probably will. That's just the thing. Like, just the way they handle this movie, you'll probably cry. At some point, it'll probably happen. Or at least you like well up or have an emotional beat or something within you if you have a soul. But I definitely enjoyed it. Just not as much as, you know, the first 2 movies. I would definitely say that it was like, it's like I said, aside from that little portion in Guardians Volume 2, I still think overall it's like, all right, I laughed a lot more. I enjoyed, you know, well, I think the heart of this story is definitely more intense than the heart of, you know, part 2 with, you know, the stuff with his father and things like that. But I don't know. I think it really is just the pacing. Like, aside from feeling that slow portion in the middle of 2, beginning and end, I think perfect pacing. And this movie was like, all right, sporadic and stuff like that, but also the comedy that's there isn't there nearly as frequently. And maybe that's a part of the pacing, you know, with the other movies, is that because they're more comedic, when something is, you know, taking time within a certain location and it's not as comedic, it's like, oh, it doesn't feel like the Guardians movies. And maybe that's it. That's what I feel in this. Even though there's so much stuff happening, I feel like a lot of it feels so different from what we've experienced before, because it's like, oh, this is very serious. It almost feels like a lot of the emotional weight that's hit on the characters in like Avengers, after Infinity War and Endgame and stuff, where it's like, dang, we lost all our people. And it's just, at that time, it was like, Nebula and Rocket. I feel like it's kind of that emotional tie through a lot of this movie. And I'm like, it's well written and it's good for sure. Like, the connections the characters have are very serious, but I would prefer if it was serious and funny. Like, it's more just serious than it is funny. And I think that's what really takes it down for me more than literally anything else. Cause it's not bad. It's not like it's, the pacing is horrible or anything. It's not like it's not well written. It's just like, man, I just wish this was like a funnier movie. Like, even though they're dealing with something super serious, I feel like that one serious thing could have been like the only serious thing, and I would have liked the movie better. But I felt like it was, aside from just like the Rocket stuff being super serious, they've had time with these characters. The characters know each other, they're family now. Everybody is serious, and they argue with each other throughout this movie like quite a bit. And it was like, it just feels a lot more serious and a lot more dramatic than comedic. And I would much rather had more comedic than dramatic. So I think that's my biggest gripe with the whole thing, where it's just like, still enjoyable for sure. I would definitely watch it again, not in theaters, but I barely watch most MCU movies twice in theaters. But I would definitely watch it again for sure, because I enjoyed it. But it's definitely like, I wish there were more comedic moments and less dramatic moments, because it was just like, oh, okay. Like, it's the Guardians. Like, the whole point is like, it's fun and action, and then there's like a serious piece, which they already had with Rocket as like the main heart of it. But then it was like a lot of other serious stuff kept happening throughout the film, and I was like, I feel like this almost takes away from how funny and fun this movie could really be. And also the music thing, definitely my least favorite, I think, out of the three films, where it was like, it wasn't just like, boom, that really hit. Like, that was the song. That was the moment to play that song. It was just, all the songs were just like, these are famous songs. That's really how it felt. That's very unfortunate. I think the last time they used a song, or not the very last time, but like the final like action scene where they used one, I was like, I think this was the one moment in the whole movie where I was like, that worked perfectly, like that. And then the very last time they used the song, which of course, that's spoilers for that one, for both of them really, but those are the only two moments. Like, literally the last two times they do like the needle drop, I was like, that feels like the appropriate song to play right here. And I think that works. And one of them was an action sequence, so it really could have just been kind of like any upbeat action song, admittedly, but it just fit. Like, so I think like I said, it could have been like almost any famous upbeat song, but the one they chose is a good song. But I was like, okay, it was kind of that thing, which once again, unfortunate. I think that was just a degradation throughout all three of the films, honestly, because it was like that with two. It was like, definitely good, not as good as the first movie, and then this was like, not even as good as the second movie. And that's really unfortunate, because like I said, there's like 2 out of like 4 or 5 moments where it's like, here's the song, and it's like, well, that just feels like a song you just played just because, like, it just meh. So that's pretty much it, non-spoiler wise. Also, if you got this far, I have to say this: play the Guardians of the Galaxy video game. It was super, super underrated, and it is absolutely amazing. It of course takes some strides from the film franchise and stuff like that, with kind of the more comedic tone. That game is absolutely amazing, and you make choices so you can actually play through it twice and have like different things happen. You get different dialogue, different locations in the game, stuff like that, different characters to help you out. And so there's a ton of stuff to do in that game. It is super fun to play. It is super fun visually. It's amazing because you go all over the effing place. So it's just like the movies, where visually it just looks insane because you're in all these different places within the galaxy or within the universe. But it's really good. So highly recommend that. You can probably get that junk for like, I think it's even on sale. You can probably get that game for like $30. Guaranteed. If you like any of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, I guarantee you'll like that game. That's how good it is. Like, it is unfortunately a sleeper hit. Like, that game is effing amazing. The music is good. The music is good, like, all the way through. So definitely check that out if you have not. I highly recommend it. It is 100% guaranteed to be enjoyable. If you have liked a single moment of the Guardians throughout the MCU, you will love that game. That's how good that game is. It's like guaranteed you will. So check it out because it's really good. So getting into spoilers. So once again, if you have not seen it, full spoilers from here on out. I would say with the songs at the end, them playing the song from the beginning, or I guess technically it was the first song from the first movie. I thought that was a great way to end things. Groot was like crazy. Well, he wasn't Godzilla mode because we actually saw him do like a crazy kaiju mode, which I thought was amazing. But I like how we looked at the end. We have like that new set of Guardians with Adam Warlock, and I felt like that was oh god, it's like Fella something. I can't think of her name, but like the young girl is actually like a comic character. Once I heard who that character was, I was like, oh, I didn't realize that was supposed to be her. But I was like, okay, that's cool. I like how they ended with Rocket is now the new leader. The rest of the Guardians kind of go off and do their own thing. Nebula has to find herself. Drax, or no. Mantis has to go off and find herself, so she takes the creatures, which I thought was really funny. So she goes off to find herself. Drax actually straight up cries when she leaves, and I thought that was really cool. So I like that they had that bond with those characters, especially transitioning over from the holiday special, which I remembered to mention that in the non-spoiler segment. Check that out for sure. But I like that, so I was like, oh, that's cool. Like he actually cried when she left, and so he ends up staying. He's Drax the dad now, so I was like, oh, that's cool. He got to have kids again, so I was like, all right, that's pretty neat. So he and Nebula end up staying there. Peter, who apparently is returning. If you didn't see the post-credit sequence, the legendary Star-Lord will return. I'm very curious about that one. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I thought that was cool. I was like, all right. And so he is actually officially coming back. He's gone to Earth. He saw his grandfather. He's met his grandmother. He has, I guess it would be his uncle. Yeah, it would be his uncle. Yeah, so he has an uncle who's like, they said he was like 45. They don't show him, but they talked about it. I thought they were going to lead to like some weird reference, but then it was just them talking about the dude where it's like, why doesn't her son do anything and stuff like that? And then that was pretty much it. I was like, I thought they were going to lead to like some weird reference where it's like, oh, it's actually like this character, or maybe it would just be like a random actor showing up, but it was nothing. It was just them talking about it and him eating cereal. So I was like, oh, I thought that was actually going to lead to a legit reference, but I was like, all right. So, the characters are split up. I like the credits as well, where they, have clips from like all the movies, even the special, and, they show stuff from Infinity War and Endgame. I think they also use like promo pics when they had that scene with Peter and Gamora. I can't remember if that was from the first movie. Maybe it was. It's been such a long time since I've seen it, but it almost looked like it was a promo pic that obviously they just, split in half, but that was probably from the first movie. It definitely was. Time-wise, it was for sure from the first movie. I don't know if that was a promo pic or actually a shot from the film, but it looked like a promo pic just the way it looked to me. But I like the credits and how they did all of that. But Adam Warlock, got to talk about that. When he showed up in the beginning, and this is what I was talking about, where I was like, I love the first action sequence because that's what I was expecting from Adam Warlock. I'm not the most in-depth dude when it comes to knowledge on the comics, but I know who Adam Warlock is. I know that he's the guy that actually got the Infinity Gauntlet from Thanos, in that Infinity War. So I was like, I know what this dude can do. He is strong. He's powerful. Like he's not someone you can F with. And when he first came in, that's who he was. He flies in, tackles Rocket, and it's just chaos. Like he wipes out everybody in that first sequence until Nebula stabs him. And like she stabs him, he's like, that hurt. And I was like, okay, this still fits with his character, because like the whole point is that he just woke up. So him being like, oh crap, like they got me on that one. They messed up some of my gear and stuff. All right, I know how to handle them though. I basically wiped the floor with everybody. I just got caught in the back. Let me take off, regroup a little bit. I'll come back later, and then I'm gonna kill him. That's how I thought he was gonna be, because that's what he was in the beginning. He came in full Terminator mode, and I was like, oh, this is Adam Warlock. This is what I was hoping for. Even when they show the trailers, that's kind of how he seems. And I was like, I'm very excited to see how this character plays out. And he was funny, but I definitely didn't like him as much throughout the rest of the film, where he was just stupid. I definitely loved the scene where he did like kill the guy. I was like, well, how much more could we possibly teach him? So I thought that was probably my favorite scene that he did, but it did kind of suck because in the opening, he was so badass that I was hoping that was him, where it was like they have the High Evolutionary is obviously like the main villain, but then this is like the Enforcer dude. He's like the sub boss that, sometimes the secondary boss is like the character that everybody likes, and then the main boss is like, we'll just kill that dude at the end. But the sub boss is the dude where you're like, that guy's pretty sweet. That's what I thought he was gonna be. And he was in that first moment when he came in and just wrecked shop on the whole effing place and was just whooping everybody. And it was like, oh, I got stabbed in the heart. Let me regroup. I'll come back later. And then he was just like the dumb kid throughout the rest of the movie. Super powerful, but the dumb kid through the rest of the movie. And I was like, well, that sucks. That is like, if he started off funny, I still would have been disappointed, because I was hoping that he would be, considering like what he is as a character, I thought that we would see him be that throughout the entire film. And so, especially when they introduce him that way, I was like, this is going to be sick. Like, he's going to be a really fun villain, which I even assumed that he was going to, because of the comic, honestly, I assumed he's not the main villain. So of course he's going to turn good. Something's going to happen. The High Evolutionary is going to do the obvious thing where the bad guy is like the worst bad guy ever. And then the other bad guys are like, I hate this other bad guy. And then of course he turns on him. And it was like, I just figured that was going to happen. Somehow he's going to become a hero by the end of the film. It was just like, it's Adam Warlock. They're not going to make him a villain and stay a villain and then kill him off or something. I was like, he's going to be good, which is what happens. It just, unfortunately, happened that way without him being super cool throughout the rest of the movie as well. Because I thought those two things were going to come together and it would have been great. And then instead it was like, epic introduction. And then he was just like the dumb kid throughout the rest of the film who didn't understand stuff. I did like the part where Gamora threatened to kill the Thing, and he was like, he went in to like kill him, and she was like, get back off from him and kill this thing. He was like, well, don't be harsh. So that was another funny one too. He had some great jokes for sure, like I said, but I was definitely upset where it was like, dang, I don't even know that much about comics, but I know how powerful and cool he is. And they showed him be that in the very beginning, and that's what had me so hyped. And then it was just like, that's it. He's dumb for the rest of the movie. Powerful, but dumb and doesn't understand things, and everyone like insults him and stuff. And it was like, it just hit harder that it sucked to me because of how cool he looked in his very first introduction. No words, he's just a thing coming in. It's like, what the F is that? Blows Rocket through a couple of walls and then just starts wrecking shop on everybody. Super great introduction. And then he was the dumb kid throughout the rest of the movie. And I was like, dang, it would have hit way less if he was just that from his first moment. Like they showed him talking and being dumb and then going in and be like, oh, well, he's still really tough, but clearly he's kind of stupid. First introduction, he seemed like he knew what he was doing. Go in, destroy. Got one up on me. Let me get out and regroup. Then he was dumb. I was like, that's unfortunate because it seemed so cool in the beginning. And if they do, Rocket's team as the Guardians for however they end up handling that, maybe he'll be cool then because he might still be silly, but he'll still be powerful. He'll be able to go up against villains and be that, crazy powerhouse. But I was just like, dang, that kind of sucks because it seemed so cool. And then it didn't work out as cool, throughout the rest of the movie. Fortunately though, the High Evolutionary was a good villain, I personally thought. As far as the screaming thing, like I said, he didn't do that in the beginning. It only happened when he got to the end because clearly he was losing it. He started to lose his mind, and it was because of Rocket. Like he snapped in that flashback sequence, and that made a ton of sense because it was like no one understood it, no one got it, but somehow you got it. Like there's nothing else. And then they kind of do that as they go throughout the film. In the present day, they show the new evolution, they show the new kids that he's made, and it's like even these new beings, which are so much better than what he was, do not have just that little spark. They just can't make things. And that kind of showed like just that one moment where he was like, they can't just create what's not already there. Only Rocket can do that. And I was like, oh, that kind of explains everything he's done throughout all the movies where he's just like, yeah, just give me this thing, I got it. And he'll just put pieces together, and that's just been his thing. Like that's why he's like that. Like that's what makes him so special. It's not just that he has those skills. It's like he has this innate ability to just understand, I can make this out of this scrap. And that's like nothing else has that in like the entire galaxy. So I thought it was cool that they really brought some true context to that, where even the High Evolutionary is like, nothing can do that. Nothing has that except for Rocket. Obviously he doesn't call him, they call him P1163 or whatever he calls him. But his obsession with him once he found out he was alive was like, I have to have him back. Like nothing can do what he does. I need him. And he'd given up a long time ago. And then of course they find out. So it was just like, all right, let's see how this goes. And then he gets crazier and crazier because he cannot get him, and that's just his pure obsession. So I thought it made perfect sense that he ends up becoming the screaming guy, but I felt it didn't happen until like the end of the movie. Like once the ship actually like takes out of the ground and they like scorch Earth, the entire counter Earth, which was still a crazy thing. After that is when I think he really became like the full-on Scream villain. Before that though, it was like just that flashback sequence where he was kind of losing it. Like, I just don't understand how he got it. Like it was just him being like, holy crap, like I've made something special in this really shitty thing. But he knew something was there. So I thought it made perfect sense that he was the screamy villain, because I felt like it only came in like the last 30-40. I feel like there was a lot more of the movie left, so it does feel like it was, for a lot of people, I could see where it's like there probably was almost like a solid hour, another extra hour of him screaming at everybody. But I feel like it made a lot of sense. I was like, it was just his degradation and being like, his obsession came back, and it's like, I have to get this dude, and I'm willing to sacrifice anyone and everyone to do it, which he clearly proved when the woman that was like his right hand, like the two scientists, he had one left, and she was like, hey, you gotta stop. And she was like, I'm taking over this ship. And everybody was like, yeah, let's do that. And then he just kills everybody, and it's like, I'm going to get Rocket Raccoon, I'm gonna get his brain, and that's all that matters, because I need that brain to put into my new people. And that's literally it. That's all he cared about, and he was willing to sacrifice every single other person to get it. So I felt like it made a lot of sense that he became, like I said, the screamy villain by the end. But he got his comeuppance. I love when they took the mask off. I was like, that is super gross. It turns out Rocket actually effed his face up really, really bad when he did that. It was way worse than I thought. He took his nose off. They had his face, like, it was super, super gross. I was surprised how gross it was just at the end of the movie. It was like, this is effing disgusting. I personally love it. I'm a huge horror fan. So for me, it was like, dang, his nose is gone. His eyeball is out. His mouth was just like open. I was like, this is disgusting, but it's sick. Like, I loved it personally, but I'm like, I'm sure there were some kids in the theater where it was like, that's that one thing where it's just like, that's in their brain now. Because I'm like, that was kind of effed up. It was super effed up. I loved it though. Like I said, I'm old enough now. For me, that was great. I was like, wow, that's gross, and I love it. But that was kind of out of nowhere for sure. The rest of that movie was not that intense. And then it was just like, oh, that is truly disgusting. That is horrifying. That's a horrifying image. Thought it was great though. Fantastic work. But all in all, enjoyed the film. Thought it was definitely good. Them saving all the kids, saving all the animals at the end. Drax being stupid and knowing, of course, the language and being like, why didn't you say you knew the language? And he's like, why didn't you ask? And it's like, man. And the scene where Mantis tells him to forget was super sad, by the way. It was just like, they call him stupid and his feelings get super hurt. And then she's just like, forget. And then he's just like, you guys are lucky. I'm like, that was effed up. That was one of the scenes where I was like, ooh, see, this is where like that super deep drama comes in, where I'm like, that scene I really enjoyed though, because I was like, that was just super sad. Like, Nebula finally just snapped and was like, both of y'all are fucking stupid. Like, they could have dropped the second F-bomb right there and that would have totally fit, where she was just pissed and tired of them doing dumb stuff. But I like the way that scene was handled. I was like, that was really sad. And his feelings were hurt. And Mantis was like, oh dang, why don't you just forget about all that? I was like, that was kind of effed up. She made him forget that they said that stuff, because that's how they feel. But it was like, yeah, he's not mentally capable of actually handling that. Let's just make him forget. And we'll move on to the next sequence. And I was like, that's actually very dark as well. But enjoyed the movie for sure. Like I said, unfortunately, it is, I think, just my least favorite, solely based on the fact that it wasn't as funny. And also, I think despite him being funny, Adam Warlock not being as cool as I wanted him to be, especially with the introduction where he was exactly what I wanted, that did have a bit of a effect on me going throughout the film, where I was just like, man, he also doesn't even really fight. Like, he's, considering how powerful he is, he barely does any actual fighting. Like, I thought for sure that he was gonna show up like during that final sequence when he shows up like behind Groot. I thought that was going to be his turning moment, where he's like, okay, I finally get it. I'm going to help you guys get these other kids out of here. And then he would kind of help fight the High Evolutionary. And then he just passes out. And I was like, man, he doesn't even actually get any action sequences except for the very beginning of the movie. And then we don't even really see him use his power that much. Like, he saves Peter, which is insane to me that dude lived. I know he's like technically he's like half god, but I thought the whole point of the second movie was that he gave up that power when he like got rid of the light. I thought the whole point was like he was not half god like anymore, but I guess technically it's still in his DNA. He just doesn't have like the light, like that specific power anymore. But I guess he's still technically half god, because I was like, oh, they did the inflation stuff. I was like, they're actually killing him at the end of the movie, because they kept doing it. I was like, is Rocket gonna die? Is Drax gonna die? And then at the end it was like, oh, they just killed Peter off. And then, like the inflation thing was like, oh no, he's gone. But then it's like, okay, I guess that works. Because in my head, I still thought about the whole light thing. It was like, didn't he give that up? Wasn't that the whole power of being a god was that half that he gave up? So I guess that's not technically the case. But, excuse me, still a crazy sequence. His face, puffing up and stuff. I was like, dang, he is dead. He is dead. But that doesn't end up happening. Everything's okay. And then, everything's good. Everybody, goes their separate ways and stuff. But I like how the movie was handled. I'm very curious what they're going to do with Star-Lord going forward, without a doubt, especially being like the legendary Star-Lord. Who knows what that's going to do or what that's going to mean, for his character. So I'm very curious where things are headed with any of the Guardians characters, if they, any of the others, actually do return. But ultimately, a fun movie. Not as fun as, as the other two, but I would still say it's definitely worth checking out. It's not like I said from the very beginning, not as good as the other two, but definitely still entertaining. So I enjoyed it overall. We'll love to know your thoughts on this one, being the most likely at this point, the final Guardians of the Galaxy film. What did you guys think about it? The highs and the lows, the sad moments, the funny moments, the jokes, this and that, the first F-bomb in MCU history. All your thoughts on that, please put them down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.